The pasta was almost done when my wife said his name, not in a guilty way, not quietly. She said it the way you'd mention a dentist appointment or a grocery run, casually, while setting her fork down and looking at the TV instead of at me. I'm having lunch with Donovan on Thursday. I turned the burner down. Sorry? Donovan. He's back in town for a conference. We're just catching up. Donovan. Her ex from before we met, the one she'd dated for 2 years, the one who'd moved to Portland when things fell apart, the one whose name I hadn't heard in maybe 4 years. You're having lunch with your ex. He's an old friend. He's your ex-boyfriend. She finally looked at me. You're being weird about this. I wasn't being weird. I was standing at our stove in our kitchen, in our house, with our 8-year-old daughter doing homework at the table 6 feet away, and my wife had just told me she was going to lunch with the man she'd been in love with before me. But sure, I was being weird. I put the pasta in the colander. I said nothing. My daughter, Penny, looked up from her worksheet and said, Dad, can you check number 4? I checked number 4. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a jealous man by nature. I'd like to think I'm reasonable. My wife, her name is Gwen. She's always had male friends. I never made it a thing. I'm not the kind of guy who checks her phone or demands to know where she is. We've been married 11 years. I trusted her. But Donovan wasn't a friend. Donovan was a chapter she'd spent a lot of time describing to me early in our relationship. Not because I asked, but because she volunteered it. How they'd almost moved in together. How she'd thought he was the one until he wasn't. How the breakup wrecked her for almost a year. That's not a friend. That's a wound that healed wrong. I brought it up again after Penny went to bed. I just want to understand what this is, I said. What? What is? It's lunch. With your ex. With an old friend who happens to have been my boyfriend 15 years ago. She was washing her face at the bathroom sink. Didn't turn around. I'm not going to justify a 90-minute lunch to you, Nate. She'd started calling me Nate sometime in the last year. My name is Nathan. She'd called me Nathan for 10 years. Then one day it was Nate, like she was talking to someone younger, someone easier to manage. I'm not asking you to justify anything. I'm saying it makes me uncomfortable. She turned around then, and she looked at me with this expression I'd seen a few times before but never been able to fully name. Something between patience and contempt. You need to deal with your insecurity, she said. That's not something I can fix for you. She went to bed. I stood in the bathroom for a while looking at myself in the mirror. She went to lunch on Thursday. She was home by 2:30. Cheerful. She'd had a glass of wine with the pasta. She showed me a photo on her phone of the restaurant. Brick walls, Edison lights, the kind of place I'd never taken her. Isn't it cute? She said. Donovan found it. Good for Donovan, I said. She laughed like I'd made a joke. But that was it, I told myself. One lunch, old friends catching up. I let it go. Until 3 weeks later when she mentioned him again. Donovan's still in town, it turns out. His conference got extended and he's thinking of relocating. His company might be opening an office here. Something cold moved through my chest. Oh. He invited us both to dinner, Saturday. I thought it'd be a good chance for you two to meet. I looked at her. You've seen him more than once. Twice. We had coffee last week. I told you. Wait, I might not have mentioned it. She looked mildly guilty for about half a second, then smoothed it over. It wasn't a big deal. You were busy with the Henderson project. I was always busy with the Henderson project when it was convenient for her. You didn't mention it, I said. I'm mentioning it now. She tilted her head. Will you come Saturday or not? I went. Donovan was tall. Of course he was. Fit, easy smile. The kind of guy who fills a doorway and doesn't seem to notice. He shook my hand and said he'd heard so much about me, and I believed exactly none of it. Dinner was fine on the surface. He was charming without being obvious about it. He and Gwen talked about people I didn't know, laughed at references I wasn't in on. I asked him about his work. He asked about mine. Architecture, I told him. Structural, not residential. He nodded like I'd said something mildly interesting. Halfway through the main course, Gwen put her hand on his arm when she laughed at something he said. She didn't do it with intention. That's what I kept telling myself on the drive home. It was reflex, old muscle memory, nothing. But I'd seen it, and I couldn't unsee it. In the car, I said, "I don't want you seeing him anymore." She went very still. "Excuse me. I'm asking you, as your husband, to stop seeing him. You're telling me, not asking. Then I'm telling you. He's not just an old friend, Gwen. I watched you tonight. Watched me." Her voice went flat. "You were watching me. You touched his arm. I touch people's arms. I'm a tactile person. You don't touch my arm like that." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, quietly and very clearly, "You're being controlling, and I'm not going to let you isolate me from people I care about." People. Plural. She'd upgraded him from old friend to people I care about in 3 weeks. I didn't say anything else. I drove us home. Paid the babysitter, checked on Penny, brushed my teeth, lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 2 in the morning. My brother-in-law, Gwen's older brother Hap, owns a sporting goods store about 20 minutes from our house. He's one of my closest friends, has been since before Gwen and I got serious. More than once I've thought, if this marriage ever ends, I keep Hap. I called them the next morning while Gwen was at yoga. I laid it all out. The lunch. The coffee I hadn't been told about. The dinner. The arm touch. The controlling accusation. Hap was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You sure you're not overreading this?" "I don't know anymore. Because Gwen's not. I can't see her doing something stupid. I'm not saying she's done anything yet." Yet, I said. Another silence. Then, keep your eyes open. Don't confront her again until you have something solid. You need something solid, man. Right now, it's just a feeling. He was right. I knew he was right. A feeling isn't a fact. You can't rebuild on a feeling. You can't blow up 11 years on a feeling. You can't blow up 11 years on a feeling. So I kept my eyes open. What I found wasn't what I expected. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that too. I wasn't reading her messages or installing anything on her phone. What happened was ordinary and accidental, and somehow worse than if I'd gone looking. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I walked past it to get my coffee. The screen was on. I wasn't trying to read anything, but the text was right there, large enough to catch, and I caught it. A message from Donovan. I only saw one line before I stopped myself. Last Tuesday was exactly what I needed. You have no idea. Last Tuesday, Gwen had told me she was at a work thing, a project debrief that ran late. She'd come home at 9:30 and said she was exhausted and went straight to the shower. I stood in my kitchen with my coffee mug and looked at that sentence. Then I walked to the back porch and sat down. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt like the ground had tilted slightly, like one of those moments when you step off a curb you didn't see, and your whole body registers the drop before your brain does. I need to tell you about Penny. My daughter is 8 years old, and she is the most perceptive human being I've ever met. She has these gray eyes that she got from Gwen's mother, and she watches people the way some kids watch TV, absorbing everything, categorizing it, filing it away. She'd started asking me questions over the previous few weeks. Nothing direct. 8-year-olds don't ask direct questions about things that scare them. But she'd started asking to do more things with just me. Weekend walks, Saturday pancakes, evening drives where she'd sit in the passenger seat and we'd listen to whatever she picked on my phone. She'd started spending less time following Gwen around the house, I noticed. I didn't say anything. 2 weeks after I saw the message on the laptop, I picked Penny up from school, and on the drive home she said, "Dad, is Mom okay?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She seems like she's thinking about something else all the time. I kept my eyes on the road. Grown-ups get distracted sometimes. Work stuff. She's been on her phone a lot. Yeah. Penny was quiet. Then, she laughed at something on her phone last night, and she didn't tell me what it was. She used to always show me the funny things. I didn't know what to say to that. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. She put her hand over mine and held it there for the rest of the drive. That was the moment, I think, when something in me stopped hoping I was wrong. I started documenting, not obsessively, but I started writing things down in a notes app on my work phone. Dates, times, what Gwen said she was doing, what didn't add up later. I kept it factual. No editorializing, just a record. Over the course of 6 weeks, I documented 11 inconsistencies. Not huge ones. Not she came home at 3 a.m. ones. Small ones. A lunch that ran 2 hours longer than she said. A phone call she took in the garage. A weekend errand that took 4 hours when the store was 12 minutes away. I wasn't collecting them to punish her. I was collecting them because I needed to know whether I was a paranoid husband or deceived one. And because Hap had said I needed something solid. By week 7, I had something solid. I should tell you how I found out for certain. It wasn't dramatic. There was no discovery scene. She left her phone on the nightstand and went downstairs to start dinner, and the screen lit up with a message preview from a contact saved as D. Not Donovan, just D. And the preview said, "Tonight was a mistake. We should talk." She'd already deleted the message by the time I heard her on the stairs. She picked up the phone, saw the blank screen, put it in her pocket. Her expression didn't change. I went to the garage. I sat in my car for 45 minutes. I'd been right. I was a deceived one. I didn't tell her what I knew. Not that night, not that week. I know that sounds strange. Most people hear that and they say, why wouldn't you confront her immediately? And I understand that instinct. I felt it in the car, the urge to walk back into that kitchen and put everything on the table and watch her face. But I'm a structural engineer. I think in load-bearing terms. I think about what's underneath things before I try to move them. If I confronted her that night, she'd deny it, move evidence, maybe even get ahead of the story with people we knew. I needed to be ready before I moved, so I got ready. I called a family law attorney named Hargrove, not to file anything, just to understand the terrain. He walked me through what documentation looks like, what matters and what doesn't, and what my rights were with respect to Penny. That last part was the part I focused on hardest. I also called Hap, told him what I knew. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, man." And then, "What do you need?" "I need you to know," I said. "That's it for now." The moment everything stopped being quiet happened on a Sunday morning. Gwen had taken Penny to the farmer's market. I was home, reading. My phone rang a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was Donovan. "I think we need to talk," he said. His voice was measured, controlled, like he'd rehearsed this. "I'm listening. This situation has gotten complicated. I want you to know that I care about Gwen. I'm not trying to blow up your family." I sat with that for a second. "Okay, she's going through something. I think you know that. I'm not the problem here, man. The problem was already there." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was a contractor explaining why the foundation was already cracked before he arrived. "Here's what I want you to hear," I said. My voice came out calm, steadier than I expected. "You called me. That tells me you're rattled about something. I'm not interested in what you think the problem is. What I am going to tell you, very simply, is that whatever this has been, it's over. Because if it isn't, you'll want to have a very good attorney on retainer. Are we clear?" A pause. "You don't have anything." "I have everything," I said. "Have a good Sunday." I hung up. My hands weren't even shaking. I told Gwen that evening that I knew. I didn't yell. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I sat down across from her at the dining room table. The same table where we'd had 100 family dinners, where Penny had learned to color inside the lines, where we'd done taxes and signed documents, and argued about renovation budgets. And I laid out what I had. The laptop message, the documentation, the phone call from Donovan that morning. She cried. She said it wasn't what I thought. Then she said it was only emotional, nothing physical. Then she stopped talking and just looked at her hands. I said, "I'm not interested in the details tonight. I need you to hear one thing." She looked up. "I've already spoken to an attorney. Penny stays in this house. If we do this civilly, I'm willing to work with you. If we don't, I will use everything I have. That's not a threat. That's just the structure of what comes next." She said, "You're not going to try to fix this?" I looked at her for a long time. I thought about her hand on his arm. I thought about Penny in the passenger seat saying, "She used to always show me the funny things." I thought about 11 years and what they were worth and what they had turned into. "You had a chance to fix this," I said. "Every time I told you I was uncomfortable and you called me controlling, every time you chose to lie instead of talk, you decided what this was going to be. I'm just the one responding to it." She didn't say anything. I got up, made Penny's school lunch for the next day, and went to bed. Gwen moved to her sister's 3 weeks later. Penny cried. I held her and let her cry and didn't say a single negative thing about her mother. I told her that both her parents loved her, that she wasn't losing anything, that some things between grown-ups were complicated but that had nothing to do with her. Penny pulled back and looked at me with those gray eyes. "Is it because of the man?" I was very still. "What man?" "The tall one. From dinner." She'd seen more than I knew. She always did. "That's grown-up stuff," I said. "You don't need to carry that, but it is because of him." "Yeah, sweetheart. Partly." She nodded slowly, like she'd already done the math and just needed the confirmation. Then she leaned back into me. "I want to stay here, with you." "You're not going anywhere," I said. I ran into Donovan once more, about 2 months later. I was at the hardware store of all places. He was in the paint aisle. He saw me first, and for a second I could see him calculating, fight, flight, or pretend I'm invisible. He went with a nod. Tight. Uncomfortable. I nodded back. That was it. That was all it needed to be. Some people expect this story to end with a confrontation. With him on the floor, or me screaming in a parking lot, or some dramatic unraveling that proved how serious the wound was. I understand that impulse. When you've been wronged, you want the wrongness to be loud and visible. But here's what I've learned in the time since. In the long, unglamorous work of rebuilding a life and raising a kid through something she shouldn't have had to watch, the loudest thing you can do isn't a scene. It's a decision. It's walking out of the room with your head straight and your documents in order and your daughter's lunch already packed for tomorrow. Gwen and I finalized the divorce 8 months later. She and Penny have dinner together 3 nights a week. It's not seamless, and I won't pretend it is, but it works. Penny is okay. That's the thing I held on to through the whole process. Get Penny to okay. She's there. She's more than okay. Last week, she beat me at chess for the first time and spent the next 20 minutes explaining every mistake I'd made. I let her. I was glad she was paying attention. I get asked sometimes, usually by people who know the basics of what happened, whether I regret not fighting for the marriage, whether I gave up too soon or let my pride get in the way. And I always have to think about that carefully, because it deserves a real answer. Here's what I know. I didn't give up. I held on for months past the point where I should have spoken up. I held on through lunches I wasn't told about and dinners that were supposed to introduce me to the man who was already replacing me. I held on through being called controlling for expressing something reasonable. I held on through lies and half-truths and the careful management of information that all added up to the same thing. Letting go isn't giving up. Letting go is recognizing what you're actually holding. I was holding the shape of a marriage, the structure of one, the external load-bearing walls. Inside it, the real thing had already been gone for a while. Once I understood that, the decision made itself. I've thought a lot about what I could have done differently. That's a natural thing to do when something you built over 11 years comes apart. You run the tape back, look for the moment you could have turned it. And there are moments. There always are. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't cause this. Gwen made a decision, and then she made another one, and then she made a third. The lying wasn't an accident. The second meeting she didn't mention wasn't a slip. Those were choices, stacked on top of each other, and every single one of them was made by her, with full knowledge of what she was doing. I can own my part in the distance that had grown between us. I'm not pretending I was a perfect husband, but I didn't create the deception. That was hers. What I learned, and what I think matters most, is this. The way you respond to being wronged says more about your character than the wrong itself ever will. There were 10 different ways I could have handled what I found out. I could have exploded. I could have crumbled. I could have begged her to stay or taken it out on Donovan in some way that would have felt good for about 30 seconds and then followed me for the rest of my life. I chose not to. Not because I'm unusually disciplined, but because I had Penny watching me. Kids see everything. Everything. She saw me hold myself together when most people would have come apart, and I believe that's worth more to her long term than any dramatic scene ever would have been. There's something about integrity that only gets tested when it costs you something. It's easy to be a decent person when life is smooth. The test comes when you're sitting in your car in the garage at 9:30 at night, having just understood that your marriage was a lie, and you have to decide who you are going to be about it. That decision, made quietly, alone in the dark, that's the one that actually defines you. Gwen called me controlling for expressing discomfort. That word stuck with me for a long time, and I'll admit it made me second-guess myself more than once. But here's what I understand now. There's a difference between control and self-respect. Asking your spouse to be honest with you is not control. Having a line you won't let someone cross, that's not weakness dressed up as strength. That's just knowing what you're worth. I lost sight of that for a while, and I paid for it in months of documented inconsistencies and an attorney's meeting and a daughter crying on moving day. Penny is doing well. That's the measure I use now. Not whether I feel like I won anything. There's no winning in a divorce. But she's doing well, and she trusts me, and she beats me at chess and takes great satisfaction in explaining my mistakes back to me. I look at her, and I think the best thing I did through all of this was stay steady for her. Not perfect, steady. That's the only version of strength I know how to recommend.